Well, they met behind closed doors on the sidelines of the News 24 On The Record Job Summit in Cape Town. And now we know the outcome. President Cyril Ramaphosa is deploying former Constitutional Affairs Minister Roelf Meyer to Washington, D.C., all to try and salvage what's left of US-SA ties. We've roped in News 24's investigations editor and fellow history buff Pieter to help us understand how strategic Pretoria's latest salvo is, given Ramaphosa and Meyer's shared legacy in ensuring our transition to democracy.
It's also a statement by the president sending a white Afrikaner because he will take the message there that no, there is no genocide. You know, that Afrikaners aren't being singled out for unjust discrimination by a black African government. I mean, that's the message that Meyer actually embodies. He doesn't even have to say it, but certainly that's something that he will articulate. But he won't go there in a confrontational mode. He will not go there with the idea to challenge Trump. But he will go there as a diplomat, and I'm sure that he'll have ample support from the Department of International Relations.
Later in our trending topic segment, of course, Facebook is a popular place for people to sell wildlife, but how bad is it? And finally, South Africa issued its very first national weather forecast on this day in SA history.
To know when the next episode drops, hit the like, follow, and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast channels.
In Rauby's Pointless Braai Quiz for today, our question is, well, it's all happening down under this week. Which US pop star is now facing sexual assault charges in Australia? I'll give you that answer a little later. My name's Graeme Robenheimer. This is The Lead, and this is the South African story. Well, moving to our top story today, when he's not writing his next book, he's tending to that notorious whiteboard set up in the News 24 investigations team, part of the newsroom. Well, he's investigations editor, fellow history buff, and of course, author Pieter du Toit. And he's live with me now from our Randburg studios. How's it, Pieter? Welcome back to The Lead.
Thank you, Graeme. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Well, picture this, right? Sidelines of the On The Record Summit. There's you and I. We're waiting for President Cyril Ramaphosa to emerge after his speech. I've got a question in tow, about to fire off, asking him about the ANC mayor in Johannesburg and the future of that. And then he goes into this, one-on-one meeting, just him and former Constitutional Affairs Minister Roelf Meyer. And we all I was wondering at the time, what was this meeting all about? Well, now we know, don't we?
Exactly. It was quite a moment. I mean, the mythology around the so-called Rolf and Cyril's show, which dates to the early 1990s, seems to endure, doesn't it? And every time that Ramaphosa and Meyer is in a room together, people look at them and people want to see whether that reported chemistry is still there. And at News 24's On The Record event, Roelf Meyer was he attended the summit and the conference and was a fascinating person to talk to. He's someone with deep insight into the government as it stands today, and obviously deep insight into where we come from, and seeing them there backstage at On The Record, sidling off into a room for a closed meeting. I suspect they were, if I remember correctly, they were in private for about 15 minutes. And when Meyer emerged, I asked them, Rolf, what did you and the president talk about? And he winked and said, I can't tell you, it's private. Well, like you say, now we know he's about to become ambassador to the court of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and what an interesting circus, court that is, Pieter. Okay, history shows us, and I love that, you're a fellow history buff like myself, but history shows us that if it weren't for Rolf and Cyril in those hard, difficult years between 1990 and 1994 and the transition to democracy, they were essentially key leaders, key figureheads in two big parties, the National Party and the ANC, the African National Congress, holding back the hardliners who perhaps wanted to go into a different direction. Yeah, Rolf and Cyril managed to find a middle ground and steer us towards where we find ourselves today. If it weren't for them, dare I say, where would we have been, Pieter?
Graeme, you are 100% correct, and you articulated it very well. Let me just say from the outset, I think that the farther we move away from that period, the farther that we move away from the late 1980s and the early 1990s, which certainly were the most tumultuous years in this country's very tumultuous history. It provides an opportunity for those who want to rewrite history to insert their own narratives into what actually happened. And we've seen in the reaction to Meyer's announcement that, for example, AfriForum, Solidarity, the Freedom Front Plus, rejected his appointment based on this fallacy that he somehow sold out white South Africans or sold out Afrikaners. Now, that's simply not true. If you go back into history, if you speak to the people who were actually there, who covered the negotiations and the transition as journalists, if you talk to the actual role players, and if you're quite honest with yourself, the country was in a state of enormous flux. Alistair Sparks, in his book Tomorrow is Another Country, writes about the miasma of rhetoric and violence which enveloped South Africa at that stage. There was simply no other way to get out of the impasse other than to talk, Graeme, other than to negotiate. You had the National Party government on one side, which still commanded the authority of the white electorate and certainly had command of the armed forces. Then you had the ANC and the Liberation Movement on the other side, who had the legitimacy and who had the support of most South Africans. And in between this, you had to find common ground. And Meyer on the one side and Ramaphosa on the other side, obviously assisted by a whole, galaxy of people on both sides. It wasn't only Meyer and Meyer and Cyril Ramaphosa, but they certainly were the figureheads who led the negotiations and made sure, Graeme, that we enjoy the democracy and the constitutional democracy that we enjoy today, even with all its flaws and even with all its challenges.
Yeah, I mean, two quick, thoughts come to my mind during that very difficult period, 1990 to 1994. I mean, notwithstanding the assassination of Chris Hani, but also, the Avia beer being led into then Bophuthatswana, yes, and the chaos that unfurled, yes, there. I mean, it's really, really rocky times, people losing their lives en masse. Okay.
Yes, it was.
What strikes you about Rolf? But he strikes me as very much as somebody who's quite quiet and has, a quiet gravitas about him. Going into the White House and all the dis and misinformation that is, flying left, right and center, not only with regards to South Africa, but many other parts of the world, he faces quite a challenge. Not so much in getting across South Africa's policies, but I think actually getting somebody to listen to what he has to say, I think is going to be a challenge, is it not?
Yeah. Two parts to in my response to that question. One is I've known Roelf Meyer for a number of years, and Rolf has always been, if I were to describe him, I'd do that in describing him as a Democrat and a constitutionalist. He passionately believed in democracy in the early 1990s, even in the government and the National Party caucus back then, when the negotiations started accelerating and picking up pace, and it became quite clear where this thing was headed. There was enormous pushback in cabinet, enormous pushback in the National Party to change course, change direction, and the idea certainly was not one man, one vote initially. It was certainly not that the white part of the electorate, or South African whites, would give up political power. But Rolf stayed the course, even to the chagrin of the right wingers today. What do you want to live in a fully fledged democracy or in a sham democracy? That was what we were confronted with back then. So Rolf maintains up to this day that the path that was taken, set by de Klerk and Mandela, was the right path. So I describe him as a Democrat and a constitutionalist. That's the first part, the first answer to your question. The second part is it's going to be extraordinarily difficult, Graeme, to successfully repair the relationship between the United States, Trump's United States, and South Africa. Donald Trump has taken in a position about South Africa, on South Africa. His beliefs about the country is set. We know that he's someone that once he starts believing something, and once that takes root in his mind and in his head, he doesn't shift from that. And that's the way in which he views South Africa. So that his perception of South Africa is largely shaped by popular culture and popular media, by people like Elon Musk. We understand by someone like Gary Player as well. We obviously know that conservative and right-wing organizations in South Africa, like the Freedom Front Plus, like AfriForum and Solidarity, have done enormous work in trying to influence the Trump administration, the White House. They often boast about the access that they've got to the White House. And if you want to understand how Trump views South Africa, you just need to go and read AfriForum and Solidarity's and the Freedom Front Plus's positions on America and South Africa and South African politics. So for Roelf Meyer to walk in there and change that is going to be almost impossible, I'd argue. I do think he will have success in building specific back channel relations on Capitol Hill. He's someone that understands the value of off the books and off the record meetings to try and articulate and explain certain positions, like he did post Boipatong in June 1992 with Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC. And I think that's where that's where the possibilities, at least for success, lie, is in building relations with individual political leaders on Capitol Hill, building relationships with in certain specific areas, for example, around trade, industry, the economy, agriculture, for example. He does possess quite a significant network in Washington, D.C., which is separate from the Donald Trump administration. But having said that, he's going to have to engage with the Trump administration because that's the administration that is in power in Washington. So it's not as if he can go there and run a parallel diplomatic process or a parallel diplomatic operation. He's going to have to engage with the White House. He's going to have to engage with the Republican executive, and he's going to have to engage with the American administration as it stands at the moment. He won't be able to get away from that. It's going to be extraordinarily and exceedingly difficult, but I think he will be able to achieve success in building relations on Capitol Hill, back-channeling conversations with certain specific individuals, and I think that's where the focus will lie, Graeme.
And notwithstanding the fact that, Pieter, he will also have to undo the damage that was done by a previous ambassador, Ibrahim Rasool. Now, it's very important at this juncture of this conversation to go, take what Ibrahim sort of said as a human out of the equation. I mean, he used the quote that the Trump administration's is a supremacist movement, right? Take that out of it. The fact that he was an ambassador at the time and he's supposed to represent South Africa in a diplomatic way is, always been the argument the entire time, right?
Yeah.
As Rolf goes into the Trump administration, he's going to have to play a very deft, a very delicate diplomatic role again in undoing that damage, probably first, which is going to take some time.
Great word. His is to go and manage the relationship and fix what he can. Certainly not to aggravate it. But a little bit more than that. It's also a statement by the president sending a white Afrikaner because he will take the message there that no, there is no genocide. That Afrikaners aren't being singled out for unjust discrimination by a black African government. I mean, that's the message that Meyer actually embodies. He doesn't even have to say it, but certainly that's something that he will articulate. But he won't go there in a confrontational mode. He will not go there with the idea to challenge Trump. But he will go there as a diplomat, and I'm sure that he'll have ample support from the Department of International Relations with professional and career diplomats around him to guide him through what will be a very fraught posting in Washington. So I think he understands the job ahead of him, and he certainly will not go in there like a bull in a china shop. Graeme.
Yeah. Meanwhile, can we chat very quickly about Brent Bozel III, the United States ambassador to South Africa? Look, he didn't have an easy entry into the South African swing of things. He caused almost immediate ire just due to his conservative background. I mean, we found out that actually in the mid 1980s or in the 80s, he railed against the ANC, calling them a terrorist group, and that's very much what he likes to believe was his anti-communistic side or view of things at that period. Although he now also told our deputy politics editor, MC Ferreira, that, he views that apartheid was a crime against humanity now. But then he had those utterances, very controversial, of course, that he felt that the Dubulu Bunu or Kill the Boer is indeed hate speech, despite the court ruling that said otherwise. And then he had to backtrack a little bit later. So a bit of a tumultuous time for Brent Bozel III coming into the fray, although the president has accepted his credentials, right?
Look, Graeme, all of his own making. I mean, I think a pretty poor appointment by the United States, sending someone like that to Pretoria, someone with obvious prejudices against the post-1994 project, someone that's not a career diplomat and clearly does not possess the skills to be able to represent his country in Pretoria amid very difficult diplomatic environment. His statements in Hermanus at that conference by Alec Hogg at BizNews, which seems to have all these conservative and right-wing elements coalesce around that title. The fact that he chose that as his first engagement was quite significant. And, not only did he say that Dubulu Bunu was hate speech, which anyone can really say. I mean, I don't agree with that. But what he said was, I don't care what your courts say, or something to that effect. I don't care what your courts say, or, despite what your courts say, and it was, the criticism was his dismissive attitude towards the rule of law in South Africa, which, we might not agree with court judgments, but we must respect the supremacy of the courts and the supremacy of law and the supremacy of the Constitution. And certainly that was the message from Bozel was, that he was going to ride roughshod over that. And that certainly raised the eyebrows and caused some anger in South Africa, and rightfully so. Of course, the president had to accept his credentials. The South Africa needs and wants to and must build a relationship with the United States. So Bozel seems to have settled down a little as far as his public statements are concerned. I saw that he met Thabo Mbeki, seemed to have been a pretty warm meeting with a warm handshake afterwards. But certainly, I think if you look at the previous appointments by previous U.S. administrations, previous ambassadors went out of their way to try and understand the history in this country, the complexity and the dynamics at play. And we had ambassadors from both Republican administrations and Democratic administrations who were really open and friendly towards South Africa. Bozel comes from an antagonistic administration. His first actions in this country was antagonistic towards the constitutional order that we have. So I'd argue that he's still in for a rough ride in South Africa.
Yeah, let's sort of end here, Pieter. The big elephant in the room for South Africa geopolitically has, of course, been our historic post-1994 siding with Iran. And given the current fraught situation that we're sitting ourselves with, both the US-led Trump administration as well as Israel, and the global conflict that appears to be escalating and not getting any better, that appears to be the stumbling block. And that's what Bozel said as much in our reporting on News 24 to MC, that essentially we need to overcome this. I mean, it feels like at this stage an almost very difficult thing for Pretoria to do. I don't know how we move forward in this regard, especially when South Africa is being left out of the G20 and G7, etc. Your view on this?
Look, Graeme, our relationship with Iran is problematic. I mean, it is an oppressive theocracy where there are no political individual rights, where women are, don't have full rights, next to their male counterparts. It is a country which has been involved in fomenting insurrection and violence across the Middle East. So there's no doubt that Iran is a problematic country, and that is a country that certainly had to be addressed within the problems around Iran, had to be addressed within the framework set by multilateralism in the geopolitical environment, and that's something which the United States have now broken. They've broken the international order, and they've broken the international system, the international rules-based system. But that does not detract from the fact that Iran, like I said, is problematic. And South Africa, unfortunately, we've hitched our wagon to a couple of states that you would rather not associate yourself with. certainly Iran, but also, Vladimir Putin's Russia, where, we've shown a great deference for, and we've shown a closeness to, which is problematic for us. If we really want to pursue a foreign policy which puts South African interests first, we need to be much more deft, to use your word, and certainly much more agile in the way in which we arrange ourselves on the international stage. The Europe, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, certainly China. Those are our biggest trading partners. Those are the partners that we need to build our relations with. Certainly not countries like Iran, and certainly not a country like Russia. So it is problematic. But in the current political environment, I don't see South Africa revising or reviewing our relationship with Iran. The conflict between Ramaphosa and Trump, the United States and America, is of such a nature that neither country is going to back down. Although I certainly do believe it's in our own interest to distance ourselves from Iran.
Sure. Okay. And I just wanted to add as a side note, did you see the headline that Elon's dad, Errol, is now pushing this campaign to get Afrikaners to go and set up farms in Russia? I mean, the irony is not lost on you. On us.
I know there's a couple of rugby players that have gone to Russia, but they've made their way back pretty quickly once the Russian winter hits. So now look, Elon's dad seems to be on a tangent of his own. Good luck to him, but I won't again, to use the phrase, I won't hitch my wagon to Musk Senior, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I just thought it was very humorous. Pieter, baie dankie. Thank you so much for your time on the lead today. I really do appreciate it, and go well. I know you've got many things on your plate, and I'm looking forward to what the investigations team conjures up next.
Thanks, Graeme. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, we've got some proper stories that we'll publish over the weekend, so look out for that. Jeff Wicks, Zara Karim, the whole crew ready to publish on Sunday and Monday.
You're listening to the latest edition of The Lead on News 24 with Graeme Rowenheimer. If you've got an opinion on what you've heard so far, drop us a short voice note on our WhatsApp hotline. That's 072 562 3179. Trending topic.
Moving to our trending topic, Facebook's marketplace and mostly closed private groups are proving to be an all-too-easy place for people to sell wildlife these days, according to a new study revealing that the social media site hosts about 3/4 of all online illegal wildlife trade adverts. Every hour, a new ad is estimated to go up there, with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, or GTOC for short, reporting that 60% of these ads tracked over a 2-year period list prices for wildlife. Now, the total value of these advertised figures is around 1 billion rand, and more than half of the wildlife advertised is critically endangered, according to News 24 journalist Nicole McCain. Now, in South Africa, common animals seen up for sale on Facebook include African grey parrots as well as pangolins. Facebook's parent company, Meta, has already introduced measures to combat this trend from getting worse, but the group GTOC argues that these measures have been quote-unquote sporadic and insufficient. Got something to add on the topic? Drop us a comment below.
Looking for a smarter weekend scroll? The Weekender is your ultimate guide to bold stories, sharp opinion, and a fresh lens on life in Mzansi. From exclusive interviews and powerful essays to wine picks, playlists, and pop culture gems, it's your perfect weekend read all in one place, landing every Saturday on News 24. And finally,
Ending off now with On This Day in South African History. That's courtesy the SA History Online database. Well, on this very day, it's the 15th of April 1912, just 2 years after the Union of South Africa was formed. And by then, it issued on this very day its very first ever national weather forecast. Well, I tried, but I can't find a reliable source to show exactly what that forecast said. Maybe it was mild in the mother city and raining in Joburg. But the Union Weather Service, as led by a gent named A.G. Howard of the time, heralded the first forecast out of their new headquarters in Cape Town. They essentially brought together 4 provinces' separate services under one umbrella. as daily rainfall data had been recorded since the year 1836, before which the UWC later shifted its operations to the capital Pretoria in the year 1926. And then later on in the 1930s, South Africa even contributed crucial data to the world through its now world-class meteorological observations. Hey, the more you know. In Rauby's Pointless Braai quiz for today, I asked you, it's all happening down under this week, which US pop star is now facing sexual assault charges in Australia? Katy Perry, if you'd believe it. Actor Ruby Rose of Orange is the New Black fame claims Perry sexually assaulted her at a nightclub in Melbourne back in 2010. Now, Perry's representatives online has claimed it's all a dangerous, reckless lie, whilst Rose refuses to say any more at this stage. Australian police too remain cagey, but do confirm to the media that an investigation is underway. Don't forget to get in touch with The Lead. You can drop us a mail at thelead@24.com. Otherwise, you can drop a comment below. That also helps. Just a note to say, we've got one more episode this week, of course, dropping on Thursday at 7 p.m. And that's a one-on-one Newsmaker Thursdays interview with the Action SA Josie Merrill candidate, the former mayor himself, Herman Mashaba. Got any questions for him? Now's your opportunity. Drop us them below, or otherwise, like I say, mail us. And perhaps your questions will feature in that edition. My name's Graeme, and so long as there's trusted news first, we'll have The Lead.
New episodes of The Lead air Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m.